Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar on what's new in Microsoft Graph API as part of CSAP Corner Toronto chapter. My name is Nilesh Shah. You can reach me at my Twitter handler at the red Nilesh R_Shah and also on my blogging site www.nilesh.live. Please stay connected, those who have joined in this webinar. I will walk you through what is new in Microsoft Graph API, some of the latest development in the last few months, and I will also show you the hands-on demo. A little bit about me before we get started on the Graph API. My name is Nilesh Shah. I'm working as tech lead at RN Design Limited. It's a leading firm in residential development. We cater from start to finish to all the requirements of a residential industry. I'm working on Office 365, Azure, and .NET development on day-to-day basis. I'm a CSAP Corner MVP for the year 2017 and 18. I'm also the founder and chapter lead of CSAP Corner Toronto chapter. So the theme about today's webinar is make developers aware what is new in Microsoft Graph API, the features of Microsoft Graph API, and what are the latest developments in past few months. Microsoft Graph, the tagline is one endpoint to rule them all. And down the line, as we go to the presentation, I'll explain you what does it mean. This is the content which is going to be covered in today's webinar: introduction to Microsoft Graph API, Microsoft Graph Explorer, and Microsoft Graph SDK, Microsoft Graph API's advantages, its features, and some limitations. What's new? Under that, I'll cover extensions, batching, data query, Excel API, webhooks, Office 365 reporting, Microsoft Teams, and also the connectivity to Excel, Power BI, and Visual Studio. In the demo, I'll show you the SDK, how does Microsoft Graph SDK work, how you can integrate it into your application. For that, you also require Office 365 developer subscription. I'll show you how you can get it for free for 1 year and how you can register your application to work with Microsoft Graph. So let us start with some background that how Microsoft Graph API came into picture. Until some years ago, there were different Office 365 APIs. There are more than one Office 365 APIs. So what happened that when Microsoft launched Office 365, originally it started with Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Outlook. And then Microsoft started adding new and new features. Microsoft acquired some other products like Yammer. So what happened that each and individual team had each and individual product of Microsoft Graph API had APIs for them. So there were different APIs. So there was a one API for OneDrive, there was another API for Outlook, there are different API for Yammer, and mostly all and every other Microsoft product in Office 365. So each and every API was working differently. So this was the scenario if you were a developer and you wanted to connect to Office 365 API, then first you have to find the URL or endpoint of the API. So there were no standardization. One API was named as api.something.com, another API was named as productname.api.com. So there were no standardization. Once you find the proper API URL, then you have to connect to that API. You have to do the authentication procedure and get the access token because the APIs work on the access token. Then you are once connected, then you fire a call to the API and the API will return you some data. So you will get that data. And consider a scenario where in your application you are connecting to more than one API. So you, in your application, you also want some data from Outlook, you also want some data from OneDrive. So you have to connect to different APIs and you have to repeat this procedure. The first three steps I told you for each and every API, and it resulted in multiple token management because you are connecting to multiple APIs. So Microsoft realized that it's not going to work very well for the developers because they are making developers' life somewhat troublesome. So that Microsoft launched Microsoft Graph API. It is a REST API for connecting and getting data from mostly everything in Office 365. Why I am saying mostly everything is that some portion is still under development, and day by day the Microsoft Graph API team is keeping on adding the new features to it. So the Microsoft Graph API is the solution of, instead of using the different APIs, and its tagline is one endpoint for all, that is graph.microsoft.com. Now if you have to get anything from Office 365, OneDrive, Yammer, or anything, you just connect to this endpoint graph.microsoft.com and you can access everything. And this is why the structure is like graph. Developer advantage, it's a single well-known resource. So if you are a developer, you want to start development working on Office 365, then these are the hands-on advantage you have. Instead of remembering or connecting to different APIs, now you have only one single well-known resource, which is graph.microsoft.com, and you can get everything from the single endpoint. Examples are, if you want to get the users data, the users in Microsoft Office 365, the groups, the email of a particular user, the calendar of a user, the contacts of a user from Outlook, the files stored on OneDrive, the tasks, the people API, which is very good, which shows you the peoples which are connected to the particular user, OneNote, and many more. Ease of development. As a developer, Graph API makes your life simple. You are now not calling a different endpoints. You are not doing a separate token management. Instead of that, you are doing only one single API management. Logical navigation. So now you don't have to think that I want to access some particular data or some particular entity, that what its API format will be, because Microsoft Graph gives you the logical navigation, and that is why the name is Graph. Because if you tell someone to plot a graph on a whiteboard with a pen, then that person will plot something like this only. This is a graph structure. Once you access one entity, then you can access every other entity related to it. Example is that once you access the user, then you can access the user's manager, the messages of the user, the tasks of the user, the people who are working with the user, the people who are reporting to the user, and the group of which the user is part of. Everything can be accessed to a graph structure. So it's a logical navigation. Platform flexibility. So Microsoft Graph does not force you to learn some new technology. There are many supported platforms. At the end of the day, Microsoft Graph API is a REST API. So anything which can make a REST call, or anything which can fire a REST call over HTTP and which can interpret the JSON, can connect to the Microsoft Graph API to make the developer's life easy. Microsoft Graph API has launched many SDKs for different platforms. There are currently SDKs available for you for using with ASP.NET MVC, for Angular. If you are doing a mobile development, then it's available in Android as well as on iOS development, as well as for Xamarin. Same way it's available in PHP, Python, Ruby, and JavaScript. So if you are already a developer with any of these technologies, then you don't have to learn something new. You can continue using your technology, and Microsoft has an SDK for you. The latest development is that if you are a developer of Java, then Microsoft Graph team has also launched a preview version of SDK for Java. So if you're the developer of Java, then also you can connect easily with the Microsoft Graph API. And open standards. So for better integration and better interoperability, the Microsoft Graph API is based on open standards. Which are those open standards? We'll see in detail, but let me name a few. These are the OData, OAuth, JSON, REST, etc. Microsoft Graph development stack. Let me introduce you how the development works in the Microsoft Graph. So at the very base level, your data is into different silos, and that is everything is accessible by Microsoft Graph REST API endpoint www.https://graph.microsoft.com. So all your data is there. To access that data, the authentication and authorization is handled by OAuth 2.0 and OpenID Connect. So it's a common authentication. Your users can be authenticated using the same Office 365 login and password. So they don't have to remember or they don't have to register something new. On top of it, you have the liberty of choosing your development environment. If you are choosing Visual Studio, then there is an SDK for .NET for Microsoft Graph API. If you are Eclipse or working on Eclipse or Xcode, then also Microsoft has SDK. Or if you want to make a plain REST calls, then also you can make, and you don't need any SDK for that. And your solution can be hosted on Microsoft Azure or on any other hosting platform like LAMP for PHP or anywhere. And you have a technology of your choice, and you can develop solutions for desktop applications as well as tablets and mobile applications. This is a simple application flow in case of you want to register, you want to develop an application with Microsoft Graph API. So what will be the flow of that application? First of all, you need to register the application. So to work with Microsoft Graph API, you need the authentication and authorization with the Office 365, which is handled by Azure AD. So for that, you need a key and value pair. So for that matter, you need to register your application, which you can register at Microsoft Application Registration Portal, apps.dev.microsoft.com. Once you have registered, then the registration portal will provide you with ID and secret or ID and key. So you have to take that ID and key and you have to configure your application to work with that ID and key. And then you have to write the authentication mechanism. So you will authenticate the user who wants to use your application and they want to fetch or use some data from the Office 365. Then those users need to be authenticated. Once you get authenticated, then you will get the access token. You can use that access token and you can get the data from Microsoft Graph. Once you have the token, then you will call the actual Microsoft Graph API. The Graph API will return the result in the form of JSON. So it will be a plain text JSON data. You have to interpret to produce some meaningful result, and you will show the result on the UI. So this is a flow of an application while working with Microsoft Graph API. So let me introduce you to some of the concepts of Microsoft Graph API, some of the latest development of Microsoft Graph API. Very first is the JSON matching. So we all know that making a call when you have to do something and insert, update, or delete operation, you will fire a call to Microsoft Graph API. So let's say you are doing a multiple operations, then in that case you have to fire multiple calls one by another. But with the help of JSON batching, what you can do is you can fire more than one calls in one go, so that instead of firing multiple calls, you are optimizing the application performance. You are combining the multiple requests in one HTTP call, and those calls can be related or unrelated. I mean to say that those calls can be getting data from different endpoints, maybe from users, maybe from Outlook messages, or one call can be a get call, one call can be a put call, one call can be a delete call. So instead of looping through multiple calls, you are firing all calls in one. The best example of this I can suggest you is, let's say you are having a grade onto which you are showing a list of users, and admin wants to update all the list of users in one go. So admin can keep changing the data. Let's say there are 10 users, those data you want to update. So with the help of JSON matching, you can combine those 10 calls and fire those 10 calls in one go. So your application is working efficiently. And a tip for using this in a best way is that you can bypass the URL length validation for complex filter clause. So what happens is that when you are appending the filter clause into your API endpoint, and your filter clause becomes too much complex, then the Graph API can throw you the URL length validation error. But if you are firing this call, a complex filter clause as a part of the JSON matching, then there is no validation on it, because JSON, it goes as a body of a JSON request. Extensions. This is one of the latest feature included into Microsoft Graph API. By help of extensions, you can add some custom data to Microsoft Graph. So Microsoft Graph will give you whatever data is existing into your Office 365, the list of users, their properties, their profile, everything. But what if you want to store some additional data on top of what Microsoft Office 365 provides you? That you can do with the help of extensions. So you don't need an external data source. In that case, let's say if there was no extensions, then you have to store some other profile related data. Let's say some user preferences, or users native language or something like that. Then you have to store it into your SQL server or any other data source. You are connecting to Graph API, as well as you are connecting to the SQL server or external data source also. But if you have something to store and extra some data, then you can store using the extensions in Microsoft Graph API. There are two types of extensions: open extensions and schema extensions. Open extensions are were formerly known as Office 365 data extensions, and they are on type data. That means you can store anything. There is no validation on the data type. You can store anything, information ABC, XYZ, or whatever meaningful information you want. So in that sense, they are flexible, and as to start with the programming also, they are easy. Another type of extension is schema extensions. So schema extension lets you define your own complex data structure. So consider it same as a table structure in your SQL Server or any other IDBMS. So you can define the limitations or the validations on the restrictions of your data type and length and everything. So the schema extensions are strongly typed, and the advantage of schema extension is that those can be shared between applications. So you first define that what the extra or custom data you want to store with Microsoft Graph API. You design your schema extensions according to that, and then there are separate APIs to deal with that schema extensions. And once you are storing that some data in that schema extensions from one application, you can utilize that data or that schema into another application as well. So it makes data sharing very easy. These are some of the more features what's new in Microsoft Graph API. In the latest, Microsoft Graph API has introduced Office 365 reporting. So this is very much useful for IT admins, for license management and every other purpose. It can show you, or it can give you the hands-on reporting of what is the usage of your Office 365 applications. Consider you are managing an IT department of an enterprise. You have so many users, and you have rolled out licensing for each and every user. So you want to see that what is the use of your applications, which are the most widely used applications, how many users are using your apps on mobile, how many users are using the apps on your iOS. so that you can do the better license management. If some particular product is not very much used, then you can use you can stop that licensing and you can save some money over there. If you go to the office portal then and log in as an admin, then on the home page of office portal also Microsoft will gives you a chart or a graph into which it shows you the usage reporting, the same type of, not the UI one, but the data in the sense of JSON format you can get from Microsoft Graph webhook. This is another feature of Microsoft Graph API. Through webhook you can get the notification of the data changes. So what happens is that whenever you have any changes, so instead of you or your application keep pinging through the Microsoft Graph API that give me some changes, give me some changes, instead of that, whenever there is any change, then Microsoft Graph application API will give you the notification. For that you have to configure your own URL to receive the notification. Microsoft Graph in hybrid deployment. So what is a hybrid deployment? Is that it's a part of Azure running on your data center as well as public cloud. So some enterprises who don't want to move entirely to the cloud, they may keep some confidential data or they can keep some part of the data in their own data center and most of other data into public cloud Azure. So the same as your stack can run on your own and on your own data center. That environment is known as the hybrid environment, hybrid deployment of Azure. If you have that deployment, then Microsoft Graph can also work in that environment. This feature is currently in preview. Microsoft Teams, it's a chat-based workspace. Many organizations are using Microsoft Teams. So this is the latest feature of Microsoft Graph API. You can connect and make a calls to Microsoft Teams. You can create channels. You can post to channels using Microsoft Graph API. Excel API. If you have some Excel data, Excel files stored on OneDrive, then you can directly access that file from OneDrive and you can access as well as edit the data inside your Excel application. You can work with Excel tables, you can work with Excel charts, everything directly using Microsoft Graph. Many organizations uses Excel, they place some set data on the OneDrive. There are some applications who populate the data into Excel, and there are some other applications you use the data. If you have some same scenario, then you can provide the data access and editing using Excel API of Microsoft Graph. Data query. Data query gives you the changes, so you can get the newly created, updated, or deleted entities after some time. So instead of fetching each and every data and synchronizing with your local store that what has changed, instead of that, Microsoft Graph will directly give you that whatever has been changed. So you can efficiently synchronize your changes with your local data store. Excel connectivity. Now you can also fetch data from Office 365 using Microsoft Graph API into Excel. You can use get data and then OData feed in Excel. For more, please refer to my blog on my website www.nilesh.live on how you can get Office 365 data in Excel. I am going to show you demo for that. Power BI connectivity, the same way you can also fetch the data from Office 365 using Microsoft Graph API into Power BI, same way using the OData feed, and you can refer my blog of getting Office 365 data in Power BI. Visual Studio, if you want to start your development in Visual Studio or if you have any existing application, then using this Visual Studio connectivity, the connected services feature of Visual Studio 2017, you can fetch your you can create an application on Azure App Portal and you can automatically configure. I'm also going to show you a demo for this. There is also my article on my website nilesh.live for how to use the Microsoft Graph Provider for Visual Studio. So it's the time for demo. I have covered my slides. I have covered my content. I'll show you the hands-on demo now. Very first prerequisite for working with Microsoft Graph is to have Office 365 subscription. You don't need to pay for it. If you are a developer, then Microsoft gives you a 1 year free Office 365 developer subscription with 25 licenses. You can go to this URL to register developer.microsoft.com/office/dev program, and you can click on join now, and you will be given 1 year free subscription which you can use for your learning purpose, which you can use for your every non-commercial purpose. I have also written an article on this introducing Office 365 developer program. Please visit my site www.nilesh.live for that. Microsoft Graph API Explorer. So now is the time for a demo. Very first, I am going to show you Microsoft Graph API Explorer. So what is a Microsoft Graph API Explorer? It's a sandbox or it's a testing tool where you can go online and you can fire some calls to Microsoft Graph API. You can easily understand how Microsoft Graph API works. You can see your input and output and you can understand. So this is the very basic step or very first step to get started on Microsoft Graph API. This is the Microsoft Graph Explorer, developer.microsoft.com/graph/graph explorer. What you see here is a sandbox. It's a developer sandbox where you can fire some calls and you can also get some data. Microsoft has provided a default login or a sample account. So without login, you can fire, but your calls are limited to get. You cannot fire anything except the get. So very first is graph.microsoft.com/which API version you want to use. You can select the version here. The version currently available are 1.0, which is the live generally available, as well as beta, which is the preview one. And is an alias. That alias covers the currently logged in user. I'm just firing a query. So this data is returned to you as a JSON format, as a JSON data. It gives the name and job title and display name and email of current user. Currently, I am not logged in, so Microsoft has provided data from the sample account. Similarly, on the left side, you can see there are some sample queries. You can just click on the, let's say this, I'm clicking on my photo. The Graph Explorer will fire that call and show you the data. My mail, these are the me/messages. So this is a logical navigation. Currently logged in users messages, Outlook mail messages are over here. My manager, the currently logged in users manager is shown over here. The direct reports of the user are shown here. Without login in the Graph Explorer, you can fire only the get calls. If you want to fire the post calls and other update calls, then you have to log in. But this is going to change your actual data. So please be careful not to use your own live account or your own organization's account, because this has the these calls can change your actual data. So I suggest you to register for Office 365 developer program and get a developer account to play with, and you can create your sample users and then use it. I'm clicking on sign in with Microsoft, and this is an admin account which I have created for my developer purposes. I have actually multiple developer accounts. So I logged in as my sample account. You can modify the permissions which you have given to Microsoft Graph over here, and I am clicking on me. So this is getting the data of me in a JSON format. Every data is available. Here earlier you see if you are not logged, you can only fire get calls. Now you can also fire the post, put, patch and delete calls. Let us fire a patch call. If you see my JSON data, then in my job title is empty, or let's say my office location is empty. Let's update my office location. For that I'm selecting all the JSON data and I want to update my office location, so I will delete every other data. And to fire a call, you need require the ID. So I am making a patch call. I only want to update the office location, and let's say my office location is Toronto. I am firing this patch call. Remember this is the last result from the last call. My office location is null. It is not specified. I am updating it to Toronto now using the patch call and clicking the run query. It says that I don't have permission. Let us go and modify the permission. So this is also a part of a demo now, that you need to give the permission of user. I have to log in again. And when I have changed the permission, it is going to confirm with me that the Graph Explorer wants to have this permission from you. I am clicking on accept. We have to formulate the JSON again for the patch. I am again copying it from here, making the call as a patch. Let me quickly create the JSON. I'm deleting everything except the ID. ID is the primary key of or the unique identifier of the user. I'm firing the call. So it has succeeded. The patch doesn't have any response except the success code 204. Now I'm firing again the get call to see what is my office location, and it has been updated to Toronto. So this is only to show you that what you can do with Microsoft Graph Explorer. You can fire some calls, you can learn how the Graph API works, and then the similar thing you can code into your program from your C# program or any other program. If you can fire a REST call to this URL and you get the access token and every authentication is successful, you will get the same data into your application as well. Coming back to slides, the Graph API Explorer demo I have shown. Now it is the time to show you the Microsoft Graph SDK. What is the Microsoft Graph SDK? To make the development quick and easier, Microsoft has provided you an SDK which you can use into your .NET application or any other application, and then you can quickly do, so that you don't have to deal with the authentication and JSON data and everything independently. Everything is provided to you by Microsoft. For that, I am going to show you the very first is a console application. Before that, let me also show you the demo of Microsoft App Registration Portal. If you go to this URL, let me log in with my sample account. So this shows me the applications which I have registered already. For registering an application, you need to click on the add new app. You can click here on add new app, and let's say I am going to write webinar demo. If you click on this one, the guided setup, then this wizard will guide you step by step how you need to configure your application. I'm not doing that. I'm quickly showing you showing you how you can register your application and how you can and where you can use it. So I have quickly registered my application and I got an application ID for it. This application ID you are going to use in your configuration file in your application. You can generate an application secret, or you also need a value key and value pair. So for this sample, I'm going to show you how you can generate a password. So click on password. Microsoft gives you password and this is shown to you only one time. I'm going to delete this application immediately after our demo so that I don't need to worry in showing you the password. This is only one time shown to you. Copy it and you are going to use it later on. Don't lose it. And then you can add the platforms that this application is going to work against which platform. If it is a web application, then click on web and you need to configure the return URL or your application's URL. If it is a native application like Android app or console app or something, then you need to click here. If it is a web API, if you are making a call to Microsoft Web API from your own web API, then you need to configure this. I'm clicking on web. Then you have to specify the URL of your application, and these are the some permissions of application you need to add from here, so that when the user logs in into your application, then user will be shown that which are the permissions the application requires. You can also configure some logo and welcome URL and privacy policy, everything over here. So previously I had done this and I had my couple of apps registered over here and I got my application ID and secret which I have used in my application. So very first demo I'm going to show you is console app. So this is the console app I have opened. In console app I have configured my client ID I got from my app. This is a native application. It doesn't require a password or a secret code. It only requires ID. And if you see my application, it has this package is Microsoft Graph and Microsoft Graph.core are the packages as a part of Microsoft Graph SDK. And this is a simple program I have written to get the users profile and some other users connected with the logged in user. So what I'm doing is I'm just firing the uh, get call and then firing the get people near me call. In get call, what I am doing is very first I'm with the help of authentication helper, I'm taking the graph client. So you are not concerned with how to show the login and password dialog or everything. It is done by this SDK and you don't have to worry about it. Microsoft will handle the username and password authentication for you. And it is the same logical navigation we saw on here. We saw in graph that this is considered up to this as the base URL and then me that gives you the current logged in user. Same way over here, the graph client, which is the base URL handle, and then you get the me and you will get the data. So once you have the data, then you can display the user. The data is in JSON format. Similarly, all of the users, this is you are getting the base URL and you are firing the me/people. So the people near to that user will be shown. Let us run this application. So this authentication is handled by Microsoft. You don't need to worry about anything. You don't need to ask for your username and password into your console app. This will be done by Microsoft. Let's say I'm fetching the sample account. I'm logging into it. So it shows me my profile that my username is this, my email ID is this. Also the people near me, all other users in my sample account, I have created some user as well as the group I'm part of are being shown over here. This is a very basic or simple example of how you can quickly use Microsoft Graph SDK into your application. Let me also show you some demo of ASP.NET MVC app. So this is a one particular application I had already configured. If you go to the app registration portal, you may find this application. So this is a sample application I had registered. That ID I am using in my config file. In ID, the secret which was given to me is over here. These apps I'm going to remove after some time, so I don't have any issue in showing you the password. The redirect URL, because currently we are using from the local host, so after authentication your control flow is returned to this URL, which is my application's URL, and these are the permissions of your application requires: user read, mail send, files dot read write. Whatever permissions you specify over here, you cannot fire any call which is outside this permission role. And let us start this application. So we are now seeing a simple demo of ASP.NET MVC using Microsoft Graph SDK, which will get the email address of the current logged in user and send an email to some particular user. For that, you have to sign in to application. I'm clicking here the sign in. You are transferred to the Microsoft online login page. So your application doesn't need to care about any user, doesn't need to do any authentication by the application itself. You just transfer to Microsoft. I'm clicking on my sample account because we are not using the HTTPS certificate in localhost. That's why this warning. Now I'm clicking on get email address. So the current logged in user is this one. I have created a sample developer account. So you are getting my email address from that developer account. Send an email. Let's try sending an email. I'm sending an email to my organization account. I'm writing demo email from webinar and I'm clicking on send mail. So it says it has sent the mail. You will see the mail over here in some time. Meanwhile, the mail arrives. Let us also see what's inside here. The packages config file I showed you will show us the Graph SDK being used. So these are the 3 packages required. The mail has arrived. If you see over here, it has also sent my photo from my user profile, and these are some of the links. I'm going to show you how it was programmed. These are the packages required as part of the Microsoft Graph SDK. Config file I have already shown that these are the four app keys required. And here the send mail, when you click on the send mail, this controller from ASP.NET MVC will be called, and they are just doing the authentication. Whenever you write this one, Microsoft will handle the authentication for you. We are building a message over here and then using the send mail. Let me show you what's inside the mail. So we are fetching the user's photo stream, logged in user's photo. So it is simply accessed by me.photo. So if you fired the call here, then we know that how you can get the user's photo. It's simply me.photo. We are firing the same call here, graph client.me.photo. You are getting that user's photo stream, and that photo stream you are then saving on OneDrive. It is simple me.drive.root, and you are saving that photo using Microsoft Graph SDK, and then attaching this photo to your email, and you are formatting the body of the email, and then you are sending the email using Microsoft Graph API. It's simple graph client.me.send email. You don't have to write anything more than this, and you will have everything done by the Microsoft Graph to send the email to particular user. Also, let us see how it gets the email of the user. So it is simply graph client.me and dot select which you want to select, the mail or user principal. So you will fetch the email. If it is blank, then you will fetch the user principal name. So similarly, this is, let me show you firing the same call on Graph Explorer. We are here. If you select me, then everything related to user is being shown, but we only want the email of the user. So instead of that, I can write this here, the optional query parameter. Let's say I want to select only mail and user principal name. So I will have only the email and the user principal name. So this is an example of how you can use the optional query parameter to select only a part of your JSON result, not everything. And you are just showing this data. So this is an example, a simple example of how you can use Microsoft Graph SDK into your ASP.NET application. Let's go back to our slides. I've shown you that demo, and let me quickly show the connectivity into Excel, Power BI, and Visual Studio Graph Connector. So let me open any Excel file. If you want to fetch data from Office 365 using Graph here, then you just go to Graph, get data from other data sources and from OData feed. Which URL you want to use? Let's say we want all users in the organization. So this is the graph endpoint for that. I am copying from Explorer and I am writing here. I was already authenticated previously for the demo, so it fetches all these users, and I'm just clicking on load. And you have the data from Office 365 into your Excel. Same way, if you are using Power BI, if you want to use reporting, then you can use Power BI Desktop. It's free for you for your personal use. You can click here on Get Data. I'm simply clicking on Other, and we have here the OData field. The same way we connected to Excel, the same way we can connect in the Power BI also. I'm firing the same call. And because I was already authenticated with some other user, it fetches all the data of my sample account. Now you see on the left side all the fields have been loaded. Let me quickly show you in a table report. And what I want to see the display name. maybe the city, job title, and email. You see, quickly we have populated all the users of the sample account into Power BI report using Microsoft Graph API. Visual Studio, let me also show you how you can use the Microsoft Graph connector. For that, you have to use Visual Studio 2017. I am using Visual Studio 2017 Community Edition. If you are a developer and you want to use it, then you can use it's a freely available for your development purpose by Microsoft Visual Studio Community Edition 2017. Let us start by creating a new project. Any project, let's say I'm creating a ASP.NET application. And to get started, let's quickly create a waveforms application. I'm not going to show any coding of waveforms or MVC. The purpose is to show you how you can take your any existing application or a new application and how you can quickly make it able to start using Microsoft Graph API. You can also connect from here, or for better, let me show you. If you in your project you will see this one, connected services. Currently there is nothing inside this one. I am right clicking on it and clicking on add connected service. Here there are many options, but our interest is the last one, access Office 365 service with Microsoft Graph. I am clicking on that. It tells me to select the domain. So your domain is what provided to Microsoft. Let's say for example I have created this one. So this is my domain, sample domain. I'm clicking on here the domain. I'm clicking on next. So what you want to do? You want to create a new application in Azure AD, or do you want to do something else? So I am clicking on create new Azure AD. So when it is done, you can come here and you can see that you will have a new application here. Which permissions you want from calendar, from contacts, from file. So you are developing an application, then you will be aware that in my application I want to fetch users data, in my application I want to fetch mail. So accordingly you have to select the permission. Let's say I'm clicking here, I am only reading all users basic profile. That's it. I'm not updating anything, I'm not writing anything. This is only for reading so that your application doesn't perform any other operation than this, and the user who are going to use our application will be also shown a consent that this application is going to read the user's data. I'm clicking on finish. So now what is happening is the Visual Studio 2017 is connecting to app registration portal. It's creating an app for you, adding a web platform to it, and configuring your solution of Visual Studio 2017 to use that app ID and password, and configuring the graph. This is just a sample page. It's showing when the page is completed, the operation is completed. It also configures your application to use the Microsoft Graph SDK by adding the required packages. If you see the output window, then it says that successfully added access to 365 services with Microsoft Graph API to the project. Let us see what it has done. If you go to the web application, then you will see that it has added a new client ID here. So this is configured to use the application registered on app registration portal. There is a new ID, new password. If you go to packages.config, then you will see that Microsoft Graph references are being added. Microsoft Graph.core, and this entity, it is part of using your SDK, Microsoft Graph SDK. And you see here that the connected services has something added over here. And it's just a sample with everything. to point out to you what has to be done. Now your project is ready to be used with Microsoft Graph. You just write the basic authentication lines, and you can write your graph client.me dot something, and you can use the user data over here. It takes some time to reflect the new application here, but this is very quick start. If you want to start using the Microsoft Graph in your application, then this is the way to go ahead. So I have shown you the demo listed in this page. We are nearing the end of today's webinar. I suggest you strongly to register for Office 365 Developer Program. Visit my site nilesh.live. It is the blog on it, how you can do that. These are some of the links if you want to get started with Microsoft Graph API. Everything in Graph is available at one place, developer.microsoft.com/graph. Your Graph Explorer is /graph/Graph Explorer. There are so many samples available on GitHub for Microsoft Graph. Go to github.com/Microsoft Graph. I have written some blogs on Microsoft Graph. All are available at nilesh.live/blogs/Microsoft Graph. And I am also maintaining an online paper or online daily for Microsoft Graph API. On Paperly, I am hosting a Microsoft Graph API daily. The links are in my slide. I am going to share my slide after this webinar is being recorded. And you can go to this page, and daily you will see the latest and latest news about articles, who has published any article or latest news content about Microsoft Graph API in Microsoft Graph API daily. Thank you very much for attending my webinar. If you have any questions, then you can connect to me on my Twitter handle Nilesh R_Sa, or I would like to connect with you on my LinkedIn. My ID is Nilesh Shah9, and you can always refer to my website nilesh.live. Thank you very much again.